Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and we're going to be discussing how to train for women's bikini. So I was kind of laughing at myself when I thought of the title, as I don't really need to put women's in there because there is no such thing as men's bikini contests. But I figured what the heck, it just kind of fit the model and it looked better in the writing. But this is for women's bikini. So this is an aesthetic competition, meaning like there's competitions where people will go to like lift really heavy weights. And this one, for example, is a competition where you go to kind of just compare your body to somebody else's body according to the standards of the class that you're in. So in women's bikini, there's two very large distinctions that need to be made. Anytime I work with clients for this goal. So real quick, I have helped people get pro cards in aesthetic sports, so I'm well aware of how to do all this stuff. I've worked with bikini competitors. I've even taught them how to do their posing and everything. So I have actually posed in high heels, and I do know all of the bikini poses, including the transitions, even the little like winks that you got to give and the hair flips and all that stuff. So I do know what I'm talking about out of personal experience. So I have coached women for this in many times over. So the two distinctions we want to cover is there are non-tested shows, meaning that the athletes can take drugs if they want, and these would be drugs for muscle building, which would be kind of ridiculous if you're in bikini, or which would be more common in bikini, would be diuretics and fat burners and stuff like that. So the main organization for that is called NPC, the National Physique Committee. Does everybody who compete in NPC take drugs? No. But that's where people who take drugs would go. So if you are a natural competitor, meaning you don't take drugs, then I always recommend that they do not go to NPC because you're kind of like showing up to a gunfight with a knife. So you're just not going to be as prepared. So your hard work and dedication can be beaten by someone else taking a shortcut so that you wouldn't be using. So it kind of just makes sense. It's not, I don't mean to downplay people who take drugs. They still got to work insanely hard. And there are some arguments that people who take drugs have to work harder than natural athletes. Now, that's going to offend a bunch of people, I'm sure. But what I mean by that is if you take drugs, especially muscle building drugs, what it does, it allows your body to heal and repair itself faster than if somebody was natural. So therefore, if you want to maximize the use of the drugs, you would train more often, more intensely, yada, yada, yada. So that's what I mean by they have to work harder, in the sense that they have the potential to do more workload and be able to recover from it. So if they do more workload and maximize the drug usage, that in a sense would be working harder because they're doing more workload than a natural athlete. That's still going to piss off everybody who's natural. So it is what it is. Whatever. You don't have to agree. The natural federations, okay, where you are drug tested, the most common ones are NGA, OCB. There's a couple other ones out there. There's probably like 4 million actual kind of bodybuilding type or aesthetic sport type organizations. So the reason why we make this distinction, it's not only because of the fact that some people can use drugs and some people can't. It's also the difference in the look. So in the NPC, which is take whatever you want to take federation, they want their bikini athletes to look like sticks with boobs. And that is pretty much true. So you have to be lean where you don't have like, pockets of visible fat. And if you were to jump up and down, the only thing that jiggles is going to be your boobs. So that's how lean they would want you to be. But you're not going to have veins showing out. You're not going to have tons of muscle separation. They really don't want that at all. You would actually be placed negatively for that stuff. But what I mean by sticks with boobs is they don't want... they typically don't reward, let's just say that, women who have curvy hips. So if your hips are wider than your midsection significantly, and you have more of like an hourglass figure, you're not going to place as well in the NPC. They more so want a girl who's just a straight up and down stick, okay? Now the natural ones, where it is drug tested, they are more allowing of natural curves. Doesn't mean you can be fat. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you have really wide hip structures and you have more of an hourglass figure, you're going to be placed more favorably in natural federations than you would in the NPC. So they did now create a new division of women. They're like, for example, all the divisions they have that women could choose from that I'm aware of, because it's always changing, is they have bikini, which is your lowest level of muscle, and it would be the least lean that you need to be. Now that's still incredibly lean. So I'm still talking about like under 10% body fat probably. It depends on natural. Some people look leaner than other people at certain body fat percentages. So these numbers that I might give are very kind of like general. So, but bikini is going to be your least amount of muscle, least leanness that you have to have. Then they made a new division called wellness, which is a kind of, you still do bikini poses, but you're promoted and you're encouraged to have more muscle in your lower body and your legs, and not as much muscle in the upper body. So the women in the wellness division were very bottom heavy in terms of their physique. So for example, in bikini, they want you to be pretty evened out. Like you don't have any specific muscles that kind of stand out over any other muscles. Very balanced physique. Now, in the grand scheme of things, when you put a bikini athlete next to a regular human being, bikini athletes are going to have very rounded shoulders, and they're going to have really, really rounded glutes. So you got to have rounded shoulder caps, and you got to have a booty to die for, basically, to do well in bikini. So, but there's really no other muscles that stand out. So they don't want big biceps or, like big quad muscles, nothing like that. They just want everything balanced, except for the shoulders and the glutes. In wellness, they wanted bigger thighs, thicker thighs. They wanted a little more ab definition, a little more muscularity to the upper body, but the women were definitely lower body heavy. So that's kind of a newer division. Then figure is kind of almost the opposite of that, where your lower body is supposed to be more streamlined, where it's very balanced between the quads, hamstrings, and glutes. Then your upper body can be a little more dominant. So now these are all loose descriptions, but pretty fairly accurate. And they do different types of posing. They're very stoic poses. They kind of just stand in one place and do like quarter turns and kind of look like a statue. Whereas in bikini and wellness, you can have some sass. You got to shake your hips. You got to, kind of play it up a little bit. Then there's women's physique, which is what we would consider bodybuilding. But you got to have big muscles, your veins everywhere, like really good separation. And they do the poses like, like front double bicep pose, like you'd see like Arnold Schwarzenegger do. And they do like kind of more bodybuilding type stuff. So as I'm aware right now, because it changes all the damn time, they don't have women's bodybuilding anymore. So the belief was that it was promoting women to take drugs and look more like men, but that's absolute horse shit. A woman can look like whatever she wants to look like, so screw that shit. I don't like when they do stuff like that. I don't believe in limiting options because you're just limiting things that women may have wanted to do. So give them the option, but if nobody signs up, then don't worry about it. But I just think it's bullshit that you can, like, somebody's trying to tell somebody else what they should have their body look like. That's absolute horseshit. So, but those are the divisions. So bikini is lowest amount of muscle, less leanness, but it's still really lean. Wellness is kind of lower body heavy with less muscle in the upper body. Figure is more muscle in the upper body and less muscle on the lower body. And then physique is kind of like a woman bodybuilder. So those are the divisions. Okay, so if you wanted to go for bikini, that's what this podcast is going to be about. And I will make separate podcasts for the other ones. I thought these podcasts, and I mentioned this in the last one I did for men's physique, I thought these were fun because I often get people wanting to do aesthetic competitions, but they don't really understand the difference between any of them. And also, this is a good introduction for me to send to someone about what their training might look like and what their focal points and stuff are. So this is kind of a preemptive work for me when I get clients or potential clients sending me emails, so which is super awesome. So thank you for those who do. I appreciate your interest in working with me. So it's fun and I enjoy it. So but these are actually for me as much as they are for you guys, so that way I can shortchange it and just send this stuff in a faster way. So training for women's bikini, okay? The main focal points is glutes, 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 glutes. So you got to have a booty. And there is a very specific way to build your glutes outward, not widthwise. So too many coaches do not know how to train the glutes to go out like a booty pop, and they end up training women in the wrong way, and their upper outer glute muscle gets thick and it widens out the woman's waist. I don't know how those trainers haven't figured this shit out already. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated. So as a woman, you have to be very, very, very careful when you train your glutes to not overdo the movements, the type of movements that build the upper outer portion, because it's not going to build kind of that booty pop that most women want. Now, it's okay if you don't want it. I'm not saying it's bad to have the other version, but most women want a booty pop, not booty width, and especially not in the upper outer quadrant of the glute, because it's going to make their waist look wider. So you have to be very, very, very careful. Make sure you do booty pop, kind of like sticking out type exercises. Okay, so glutes is the big thing. The other thing they're looking for is a balanced physique. Like I said, other than the shoulders being capped and the booty being ridiculously puppy, everything else needs to be very balanced, and you want to have a flat abdominal wall. So can you do well in bikini competitions with detailed abs? Meaning like where you can see the abdominal separations of your six-pack? Yes, you can, but they don't want a very muscular ab wall. They would rather have a flat ab wall, and there's a very specific way to train for that. But those are kind of the main focal points, is glutes, everything being balanced except for shoulders and glutes, in a flat ab wall. The secondary focuses, like we said, are the rounded shoulders and balanced thighs, because almost every woman goes into competing or into their training to compete in bikini being quad dominant compared to hamstrings. So that's something you have to very, very, very pay attention to, is making sure you balance out your hamstrings and quads, and make sure you get those shoulders rounded out. And then you have to train for upper back detail. So too few of women like have good upper backs in bikini, and you don't want to have a massive upper back, but you should be able to see some muscular detail. There should be some separation and some muscles up there. And it's kind of like you would know if you saw it. If you saw a woman who didn't train her upper back heavy at all, they'd be very flat, and all you see are like their shoulder blades sticking out. If you see a woman who trained their back correctly for good detail, it makes it look more aesthetically pleasing because it's more rounded and full looking, rather than emaciated and kind of like looking like anorexic, bulimic type, that kind of stuff. So that's your secondary focuses. Okay, rounded shoulders, balanced thighs, and back detail. Okay, so glute training. We have done a podcast in the past, podcast number 128, titled How to Build a Booty. So you can learn more detail on that one. I will tell you guys 100% right now that a podcast about 200 days ago might have slightly different information than the podcast I make today. So my knowledge is always, always increasing, hopefully, or at least that's my goal. So I do recognize that over the time of me making podcasts, I might have to remake certain ones, because I'm going to be learning kind of better ways to explain things, or learning extra focal points and stuff like that. So what I would suggest you do is listen to what I'm about to tell you now about glute training, and then go listen to podcast 128 titled How to Build a Booty, and that'll give you even more information, kind of put the two together, and there you go. So in general, when you're training for a bikini, you want to train your glutes ridiculously, insanely often to get them to get that pop effect and get them to grow disproportionately to the rest of your body in a good way. So what we typically do is 2 to 3 resistance training days a week, and we do 2 to 3 body weight training days a week. So I do have bikini competitors who train their legs and glutes 6 days a week. And that sometimes is needed for that person's build. Depends on how leg dominant they already are. I do have some women that can train their legs as little as 3 times a week, which is very little, by the way. And maybe only like twice with weights, once with body weight, or even once with weights and twice with body weight. But that's what it should look like. So 2 to 3 days lifting weights, 2 to 3 days lifting your damn self. So the lifting your damn self stuff, bodyweight style stuff, is you'll see this all over Instagram, all over YouTube, which is actually kind of helpful for me as a trainer, because you can go on YouTube and find like 20-minute booty workout, at home booty workout, and you just do that. And to be honest, most of them, overwhelmingly of them, they all repeat like the same 12 exercises, so they're actually fairly good. So anytime I send a client a link, where I'm like, instead of me writing out a workout, here's a 20-minute video they can just go through and follow along, and the person will teach them as well. So I do watch the entire videos myself, and I keep a library of the ones I think are good. And certain of them might have like too much on the floor stuff. Like, for example, I've trained women for Bikini who had bad knees, so we had to do a lot of standing movements rather than on the floor, like on like your hands and knees. So I have videos kind of specific to different positions and different type of things like that. So that way, as I'm working with clients, if they have a certain issue, say for example they have bad knees, we can still get them in amazing shape and they can still do a bunch of at-home stuff. You just have to find the exercises that are standing, not down on their knees. So that's what we do for the at-home ones, or the non-resistance training. Is typically there's some video we find on Instagram or YouTube, or putting together a sequence or circuit of bodyweight style movements. Now, the resistance training, it's just a lot of hip hinges, and hip thrusts. So can squats build glutes? Oh, hell yes, but there shouldn't be the main part of your workout. So the main focus of glute training is hip hinges, which is like sumo deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts, stuff like that, where you get more of a hip, like hip extension, hip flexion, rather than knee extension, knee flexion. Okay. So those are going to be your go-to movements, and a lot of hip thrusts, variations of hip thrusts. So there's frog pumps, there's glute bridges, hip thrusts. So all of those are slightly different. So for example, glute bridges is traditionally your upper back is still on the ground where your feet are, whereas hip thrust, your upper back is typically elevated to allow you to do heavier weight load. So there are various positions and various kind of separations of kind of like hip thrust, glute bridge type exercises. So that's typically what we're looking for. So we want to at least once a week do some heavy barbell movement, like sumo deadlifts, RDLs, or stiff leg deadlifts. So sometimes bikini competitors are too shy or too timid on doing strength heavy stuff, but you absolutely 1,000,000% need to do that. It will not thicken out your lower back. It will not thicken out your core. All those kind of worries are absolute bullshit. Okay, so doing sumo deadlifts for 5 sets of 5 is not going to thicken out your lower back. It's going to thicken out your booty, but it ain't going to thicken out your lower back. So by getting stronger, you can then do your muscle damage movements, your bodybuilding style movements, okay, under heavier weight loads progressively over time, and that'll get you the muscle to grow and grow over time. Just doing 1,000,000 reps of lightweight shit does not build muscles. You have to have a mix of the heavy and the lightweight shit. So that's very, very, very important. You have to have heavy stuff in there. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see bikini competitors make, is they don't train heavy enough. They'll go in and do a set of 5 on like squats or deadlifts, but it's a weight they could damn near do 8 to 10, and they're just like moving too damn slowly and too timid. You have to try some heavy shit and get a little risky every now and then. I'm not saying get hurt, but you have to actually test yourself. So you can't just do 5 reps of something when you really could have done 8 to 10 of it and think that it's strength building. It's not. Okay. So some other tips we have for training is you should always use some form of priming or pre-exhausting movements at the beginning of every glute workout. Okay, we did a podcast very recently, number 334, about priming versus pre-exhaust, and it explains how to kind of use those two. You 1,000,000% should be doing that every single glute workout. It makes the muscle damage component of the workout extremely more effective. Okay. So our workout sequence for glutes is typically some type of pump movement, which is a priming or pre-exhausting movement. You do a strength movement, then muscle damage movement, then another pump movement. So we have done a podcast, I'm looking it up right now, about rep ranges and like what classifies as strength versus, muscle damage versus yada, yada, yada. So that's podcast 214, Understanding Rep Ranges and Expected Results. So what we would want to look at for is pump movements are typically done for like 40 to 60 seconds of time and attention. Strength movements are typically done for 10 to 20 seconds of time and attention. Muscle damage movements are typically done for 20 to 40 seconds of time and attention. And then again, you'd be ending with another pump movement, which is 40 to 60 seconds of time and attention. By playing around within all of those time frames, you're going to get the best results possible, because we officially have two muscle fiber types, but one of them has two divisions, like a subdivisions. So you could just argue that there's three muscle fiber types, whatever the hell. There are different muscle fiber types. Let's just say that there's more than one. So changing around your variety allows you to target all of the muscle fiber types. It is true that only like one fiber type contributes the bulk of muscular size, but the other ones still contribute some size. So you would still want to train them to be your maximum best. And then also there's different ways to damage muscle tissue: through sheer heavy force that tears up the tissue, or through like metabolic annoyances, which is like a pump, and it kind of like breaks the cell down and messes up the muscle cell due to just functioning demands. So by changing around our time frames, we cover all of those bases. So that's why it's really important. If you do not change around your time frame, you are missing results. Okay? So you can't just do set to 20 for infinity and think you're going to get the best results. You absolutely will not. Cool. Okay. One real quick resource. If you've never looked him up on YouTube, look up Brett Contreras. He has an insane amount of awesome good stuff on glute training. Okay? So Brett Contreras, that's Contreras. Brett Contreras. I'm sure if you go on YouTube and just write Brett Cont, his name is going to come up. Okay, Brett Contreras. Okay, that's all the glute stuff. So tons of stuff, and hopefully that was getting you the basics of getting started. And of course, as part of these podcasts, I do help people with programming and compete in Bikini. So if you want help actually formatting this into actual workouts, of course I'm going to help with that. It's a service that'll help us, pay for the podcast, pay for the gym and stuff. But I'm hoping that through these podcasts and going to listen to podcast number 128, How to Build a Booty, you guys can learn enough to get started on your own and take care of your own health and happiness. I absolutely would never want anybody to be dependent on myself or another trainer for them to get the best results and be happy. Okay, so hopefully this stuff is helpful enough to get you started. Okay. You can always reach out to us too if you want some sample programs. Shoot me an email at brutaliron@gmail.com. I'll send you samples of past clients. They won't be written for you, okay? But you can see how we put this information together for other people and their needs. So recently I helped someone get ready for a bikini competition who was in a car wreck, and they actually displaced their hip and had to do glute rehab for hip support and hip stability during their prep. So we're able to combine that kind of stuff. It's really fun. So that way they can kind of kill two birds with one stone. So if you have individual specific needs like that, you can still do big fun things. You just have to have things organized correctly for your needs. Cool. Okay, abs. You want to train abs 3 to 5 days a week. It's best to train them at 30 to 60 seconds of time under tension and focusing on bracing, anti-rotation, or partially held contractions rather than heavy contraction movements. So you don't want to do very heavy loaded crunches. That will build the musculature outward, and that will not get you that flat stomach look that they want in bikini. So that'll actually give you muscle bumps. So, which is cool if you want that. But if you want a bikini look, they typically do not want the muscle bumps in the abs, okay? So you can go to Redefining Strength on YouTube, Redefining Strength. And on their channel, you can find, you can just type in like anti-rotation or bracing or plank variations. That lady has enormous library of really good ab movements, okay? So Redefining Strength. You can check that out. Okay, so that's what you want to focus on, 30 to 60 seconds of time or attention, 3 to 5 days a week. We typically do it at the beginning of the workout because no one ever does abs at the end. Everybody kind of comes up with some bullshit, lazy excuse and they skip it. So do abs at the very beginning and then go into the rest of your workout, okay? Then we go into thighs. So you want to train your legs directly, like quads and hamstrings and stuff directly, 2 to 3 times a week. And then typically the rest of your leg training is going to come from the glute movements. So it's very hard to isolate your glutes completely away from hamstrings and or quads, but mostly hamstrings. So you're going to get some hamstring and quad training when you're training your glutes, but you do want to do direct hamstring and quad training at least twice a week, and you want to prioritize hamstrings before quads. So if you have to pick between two movements and one of them focuses more on hamstrings, the other one focuses more on quadriceps, you want to do the hamstring movement first, okay? You want to kind of think of doing 2 to 1 So you want to do 2 hamstring-based movements for every 1 quad movement, and that's going to usually help people balance out a lot better. But lots of body weight movements help a lot as well, so you can get the balance in the musculature without becoming like overly thick in your thighs. Now, getting thick in your thighs is largely based on nutrition. Okay, so go listen to podcast 241, Nutrition Concepts for Aesthetic Athletes. Podcast 241, Nutrition Concepts for Aesthetic Athletes. Okay, so that'll tell you how to handle your food during this stuff. And we have other podcasts that are helpful too, but this one's about training. Like today's podcast is about training, so you can check out 241, and that'll even give you more podcasts to check out, so you can continue down the rabbit hole, as they say. So if you train super heavy all the time, will your legs grow from what they are now? Even if you control your caloric intake, I'm going to argue with yes. Because the second you have any amount of surplus whatsoever in the days, even if you're trying to control your caloric intake per day, you might have a surplus, a certain time right after a meal, maybe 3 to 4 times a day, and your body's going to try to use that surplus to repair the muscle and build the muscle. So if you get a lot of muscular damage from more bodyweight style movements, it does tend to result in a more streamlined thigh, rather than trying to always use really heavy bodybuilding movements to get your thighs damaged. Okay, so that's the thighs. Make sure your hamstring prioritize over quads, so 2 to 1. You can train your legs directly about twice a week. That's pretty good. And then go check out 241 for nutrition tips, so that we don't fear training your legs. They won't get bigger as long as you train them with bodyweight style movements and correct time under tension frames. So again, go listen to that podcast. That was 214. So understanding rep ranges and expected results, making sure you're training under the right rep ranges for what you want to happen in your body. Okay. Rounded shoulders. I know we're going really fast. You guys might have to re-listen to some of these things, but I am hoping it's helpful. Rounded shoulders, you want to train your shoulders 2 to 3 times a week. You want to focus on raises, not really presses. You can press once a week, for a couple sets, but presses aren't really that helpful for women's bikini. You want to do a shit ton of raises at every possible angle whatsoever. So find 12 ways of doing lateral raises and bent over raises and front raises, and then just cycle through those and find a variety of them, okay? You want to focus on the quality of your movement rather than just throwing weight around. So podcast 220, titled Muscle Intention versus Movement Intention. That'll talk about the speed and the concepts of how to train to get muscles to grow rather than just throwing weight around, okay? And you want to focus on intensity techniques like drop sets, rest pause, run the rack, giant sets, circuits, yada, yada, yada. When training shoulders, since shoulders are commonly pretty weak in most people, you can't lift with very heavy weight, so it's going to get hard to get muscle damage. So if you do things like drop sets or rest pause or run the rack techniques, that's going to help you get more muscle damage even under lighter weights. Okay? So shoulders is 2 to 3 times a week, an enormous amount of raises at every angle possible, okay? And go listen to podcast 220, Muscle Intention versus Movement Intention, to learn how to best train your shoulders intense-wise. Okay, upper back. You want to train your upper back at least twice a week. You want to focus on rowing and rows rather than pull-ups and pull-downs. Okay, pull-ups and pull-downs, train your lats. It's good that your lats are trained, but you definitely don't want to prioritize them at all. You want more mid-back detail, the muscles over your shoulder blades, and that's going to be more rows than from pull-ups and pull-downs. And again, you want to focus on quality contractions over weight moved. So lots and lots and lots of rows. Go nice and slow, get really good squeezes. You can even use isometrics, which is another form of intensity technique. Okay, and that'll help you get really good muscle damage, even if you're on the weaker end of strength. Okay, that was a lot of information. Hopefully that was enough detail that it was useful, but not so insanely detailed that it would have been hard to follow. Okay.